Okay, the first part of the assessment is to find her chronological age. So I've written down here the testing date, which is today, March 21st, 2020, and then her birthday, which is November 18th, 2016. So we have to do some quick math to get the chronological age. So we just subtract these. So this is 3. Now you'll notice here, you cannot subtract 11 from 3, obviously. So we're going to need to borrow. So this is going to come down to 19. Now we're borrowing months from a year. So we have to add 12 months to this. And so that becomes 15. It becomes 15, yep. And so now we can subtract. So we can do that, and then here, so we have that she's 3 years old, 4 months, and 3 days. Now, she was not premature. We do not need to do an adjustment. So her chronological age is 3 years, 4 months, 3 days. Because this is under 15, we just discard that. We don't think about it. We don't consider it. And then we need to turn this into months. So this will be 36 months plus 4. So we've got 40 months old. So Avery is 40 months old. And we're going to use that to start the assessment. All right, so this video is going to focus on the grasping and the visual motor integration subtests, as that's typically the parts that OTs focus on. So we're going to do this one and this one. And why we need to know the 40 months old is because for the Peabody, you don't give the entire assessment. You start at their chronological age and then you work up and down from there. So we're going to flip into the book and we'll start with grasping subtest. Define that. Okay, so you'll see here's the grasping subtest in the book. And you'll see on the left side of each page, it says start and then a chronological age in months. So for grasping, we're going to find her age, which is this category, 35 to 71 months, and that's where we're going to start. So we're going to actually start this assessment for the grasping subtest on item 15. Now, I'm just going to show you really quick in the visual motor integration. So the next one is visual motor integration. And then I'll show you really quick before we start where we're going to start there. She is at the top end of the kind of getting closer to the top end of here. So we will start at item number 55 in the visual motor integration. So that's where we'll start, and let's go ahead and get started with the test. Okay, so I wanted to show you the setup. If at all possible, you really want to be prepared and have your items set up, but out of reach of the child and in a way that's least distracting. So I have my testing form with my writing utensil, and then if possible, I like to use the lid of the box to kind of have all of my manipulatives there ready and easy to go. I've got my paper, my hand sanitizer, and I'll show you that in a minute, and then kind of the bigger pieces and the books, the testing books if we need that. Something to keep in mind, Avery, can you sit down please? Sit in your chair. Well, it's going to be time for starting the test. Please sit down. Is thinking about your child's seating and posture. So I have Avery in her high chair. So she'll be nice and supported. She can put her feet on the chair so that her legs are not dangling. Can you show me how nice you can sit in there? Okay, so she can sit, yep, she can put her feet up there if we want. So it'll be up to her how she's comfortable, but she's nice and supported. She will also be pretty kind of locked into space there. And then I'm going to sit here, kind of kitty corner to her, so that I have good line with her and then access to my materials. Something to consider, a lot of times, most of the time when we're giving this test is going to be for a child who maybe we've never met before or we've had very little interactions with. That's not the case with Avery. Avery is my daughter, so she knows me, which might give to some different behaviors, but it is normal to see some reticence to perform with a child who you've just met. They need to build some trust and rapport with you. So sometimes I'll start off with just play at the beginning of a session, or maybe coloring or something fun that I know that they like to do that parents or caregivers have reported. And so to try to kind of build that trust and rapport before we actually start testing. Okay, so that's my setup. We're here in the dining room. Okay, so we're going to start the grasping subtest. I do, if kids can tolerate it, let's do some hand sanitizer. Obviously the test kit has shared items, and we try to keep it clean and sanitary, but this helps just kind of universal precaution. So, all right, are you dry? Yeah, okay. All right. Okay, make a mark. Okay. For this assessment, you do score as you go, and you're trying to find a basal level and a ceiling level. So, to find the basal level, you need 3 2s in a row. If the child doesn't score a 2 on any of the first 3 items for their age, you start testing backwards until you get that basal level. And then when they get 3 2s, you jump forward again until they get 3 0s, which is their ceiling. And when we get to actually scoring the protocol, then I'll show you kind of what that looks like. So, where we're starting, good, thank you. Okay, unbutton these as fast as you can. So I'm using my phone to time her, as this is a timed item. Okay. All right, so since she did not score a 2 on that, and I only have 2 2s in a row, I'm gonna back up. Here, I'll take the buttons, thank you. All right. Pick up both blocks with one hand like I did. Okay. All right. We're going to try buttons again. All right. Can you button and unbutton this one as fast as you can? Nice job. Can you unbutton it?
I can.
Take it apart. Yeah. Okay. Good work. Item 25 is grasping a marker again, which I've already seen her do, so I can score it according to how I've observed her before. I don't need to give her the marker again to hold it, but if you need a refresher, you certainly can. Okay, ready? Here's our next game. Touch like I do as fast as you can. Okay? Go. Can you do this? Good job. All right. And grasping subtest is done. At her age, at the upper end of the grasping subtest, there's not a lot of differentiation. So it is very common that the grasping subtest would get done pretty quickly for older children. In the younger ages, they have more items to differentiate in their grasp development. Personally, I think this is a weakness of the Peabody too, and so I'm hoping that in the next revision, they expand that out. I think there's a lot of room to do different in-hand manipulation skills and kind of tease out whether grasp is truly an issue or not. All right, we're back and ready to do visual motor integration subtest. So, draw a circle. Sit back. Build a wall like mine. Good work.
Where are you going to cut?
I'm going to cut a piece of paper. You ready?
Yeah. Hey, Mom, I wanted to cut.
Guess what? You get to cut the paper like I did.
And I just open it again, like this.
Okay. So you can make notes on here. I'm just making a note that she needs assistance to open the scissors back up. Okay.
Bigger.
Yeah, good job.
It'll be this side.
Good job. Okay, ready?
Yeah.
Next game.
Let's go.
Build a bridge like mine. Okay. Watch me lace. Now you lace like I did. Good job.
Mom, I'm going to do some more.
Okay. I don't know where my card with the cross is, so I just drew one. The important thing, she wasn't paying attention to me, is she needs to copy this, not imitate it. So I just need her to be able to reference it. Okay, are we good? You got one more hole?
I got one more hole.
So allowing things like this, some kids will want to finish every single hole, and that's okay. Does it change your score? No, but it helps you with motivation to continue, so it's good. All right. Draw lines just like these that cross in the middle.
I'm going to go right here.
Yeah, you can do it wherever you want. Good, thank you.
I did a big one.
Yeah. So big.
So big. I did a big line too. And a big Lucy.
Yeah. Okay.
Line.
Cut on the line.
Okay. Cut on the line.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Do you let go? Another one. Let go. Then do another one. That
All right. Good job.
one. So sharp.
Scissors are sharp. We have to be careful, huh?
What's that?
It's our next game. You ready?
Cheerios?
Don't eat them.
I won't.
Okay. Are you ready? The game is put the food in the bottle as fast as you can, but only put one at a time.
Okay.
Ready? Go. As fast as you can. Good. All right, can you put the lid back on for me?
Okay.
Thank you. Oh, it's a twister.
Oh, it's a twister. 1, 2, 3.
Good job. All right.
Scissors are in there.
All right. You ready?
Mm-hmm.
Draw on this line. Try to stay right on the line.
Okay.
draw a square. Good job.
That's an A.
Well, I could see how you think it's an A. All right, I'm going to show the video what your shapes look like, okay? So that's the square, the circle's in the middle, and cross is on the other end. So this square
is
amazing. I'm going to score as a 1 for...
picture.
So you can see, because of this corner isn't exactly a corner, and so we're looking for corners that are within 15 degrees of vertical and horizontal. That corner isn't really a corner. The other 3 would have counted if they look similar, if this one looks similar to that. So I'm going to score the square as a 1. All right. Cut out the circle along the line.
From the line. Off of the line, you say?
Cut on that circle line.
Oh, okay, you're saying. I got what you're saying.
Awesome. So for cutting subtests, it's super important to be watching and paying attention. Safety is always a concern with any of the subtests, but scissors really, you know, if they're not paying attention or if they have attention struggles. Okay, do a cut. Great. Okay.
I did one, Daddy.
So good. All right, ready? We are gonna build some steps. Okay. Okay, watch. See my steps?
Yeah.
Build the steps like I did.
I want yellow.
Mm-hmm.
And then I want these spots to go over there.
Okay. Are you building the steps like I did?
Yeah?
Okay. Are those steps like mine? All right. Good.
Our order is in the same place.
Same place.
Same place.
All right. Draw a straight line
Like that.
from one dot to the other dot.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
One dot to the other dot.
That's the dots.
Yep. 301 is just a dot and a line. So that's always how
So
it goes.
I'm eyeballing it and I'm scoring it as a 1. When we get to the scoring part, we'll look a little more specifically, but if you
Like that.
put a paper in between, I can see that she goes farther than a 1/4 inch from horizontal. So the next item, item 68, is another cutting item. We've established that she's at the snipping point of cutting, so I'm going to skip that and score it as a 0 because I know how she's going to do. We've established that with several cutting tasks, and she's performed consistently. Now, if there was inconsistency in her performance, then say all of a sudden with the circle, for some reason she was able to cut it out, then I would proceed with giving her the square. But since her performance has been consistent at every single one, I'm just going to score that as a 0 at this point. All right, pyramid.
Pyramid.
Pyramid. All right, All right, see my pyramid. Now build a pyramid like mine. Good? All right. Building is so much fun. Okay.
For the side.
So much fun. Okay, watch me. All right. Fold your paper to look like this one. All right. Here is her folding for item number 70.
Number 70?
Number 70. Okay, so we have our ceiling, so that is the end of the visual integration subtest.
Mom.
Okay, so we can talk about item 67, which is connecting dots real quick. If you look at the score criteria, it talks about deviating from the horizontal. So the way that I look at that, and because I've been giving this assessment for so long, at this point I can kind of eye it. But here's Avery's drawing. And what you can do is draw a line from where she starts here and ends here. So I'm going to do that.
Who's this?
Okay, so I'm going to draw a line.
Mom, who's
And
this?
that's Snoopy. Hold on, Avery. So I'm lining up with where she connected to that dot and where she connected on the bottom dot. I'm just using her drawing paper. And then I'm going to draw a line. And then you're going to look at the space deviating here. You can take a ruler and mark it, actually measure it if you want. That is probably getting close to it. Could have been over a half an inch. And so it would give her 1 extra point if I count that or I don't count that as a 1. So we can mark it as a 0 if we think that's over. I don't have a ruler with me right now to do that. Or I could give her the 1. I don't think it will make that much of a difference because it would only be 1 extra point on her score. Okay, so now I'm done with my client, Avery, and I'm back in my office and want to score this. So I'm going to walk us through kind of the process for that. I'll show you the different pages in the manual so that you can get a sense of what that part of the process is like. So we've already filled out the beginning part of this on the examiner record book. And so now we want to look at the raw score. I just want to point something out about the record booklet is that you can use this for 4 different administrations. So you can see there's 4 different boxes. So this is for the first administration, second administration, third, and fourth. And when you look inside the record booklet, that's why there are 4 columns here. So the first, second, third, fourth time, you can use the same booklet, and then it will save your paperwork and all of that kind of stuff, because these are price, I think you get them in bulk, like in 25 packs, but they're kind of expensive. So if you're able to, if you're working in a setting like birth to 3, where maybe you would do this every 6 months to re-qualify, or maybe an outpatient setting for a younger kiddo. Remember, this is normed for up to age 72 months. So from birth to 72 months, you could use this same examine record book and be able to kind of see where they're progressing. Then the other form is this red profile or summary form. And so this you would have a separate one of these every time you would score the child on that. So that's what we're going to do right now. The first thing to do is to find the raw score, though, for the 2 subtests that we did. Again, we just did the grasping and the fine motor, or visual motor integration subtests that are typically what the OTs focus on, although you can do the whole assessment, but to get a fine motor quotient, you need to find those 2 subtests. So grasping and visual motor, you need a raw score. Okay, so the way we're going to score this is by finding first the basal level for the subtest that we're scoring. So remember we went to get 3 2s in a row with Avery, and so in the grasping subtest, that was here. So her basal was items 20, 21, and 22, and then you can see she missed some items. So when we go to score this, we're going to take the highest item from her basal, which is item 22, and we're going to multiply that by 2 points. The reason we do that is all the items on this test are developmentally sequenced. So once we've found the basal, we are assuming that she would get full credit for all of the items after that, or before that, I mean, in the sequence. And so we are counting all these blank spots that we didn't actually assess as 2s, okay? That's why we went and found the basal. So we're going to take 22 times 2, 44, and then we need to add to give her any other points that she got before her ceiling. So here she doesn't have any additional points, but then she got a 2 on item 25, and so we would add 2 to the 44. So her raw score is 46 for the grasping subtest. And so that is going to get put here on the front of the examiner record book as her raw score. So she got a 46 in grasping. Then for visual motor integration, we do the same thing. So we're going to find the highest item that she has for her basal. And so you can see here, we started here, we scored a 2, she did the next item, got a 2, and then her next item she got a 0. So I had to go back so we could get 3 2s in a row, and so she got a 2 here. So now we're taking the highest item number of her basal category, which is 56. We're going to multiply it by 2, and so that's 112. And then we're going to add all her additional points. So she got 2 here, 2 here, 1 here. Then she got a 2, another 1, and then she ceilinged out. And so she got 5 additional points. So her raw score then for visual motor integration is 122, and so I wrote that right there. Okay, so that's how we find the raw scores. Those will then get transferred onto the profile summary form here. So where it says grasping, you can see raw score 46, visual motor integration 122. All this other stuff up here you can transfer over from the record book if you want. Just to save time today, I didn't do that. But then you can see here's the rest of the information that we are going to fill out based on the 2 things, her raw scores here and her age in months. So we want to see now, how do those raw scores compare to other 40-month-old children her same age, right? So knowing that she scored 122 on visual motor integration doesn't really mean a whole lot to me. I need to know what that is in age equivalency, her percentile rank, her standard score, and so that's what we're going to do next. And so in order to do that, you need the examiner's manual because it has appendix tables that tell you all that normative data to be able to tell where our client lies compared to same-aged peers. All right, so we're going to start with Table A. In Appendix A, there's multiple tables, and so you need to find the one with the chronological age in months in the red rectangle. So for Avery, who is 40 months, we're going to use the age 39 to 41 months, and that's Table A30. You can see, like, Table A29 is for age 36 to 38 months. So you need to make sure that you're on the right table, otherwise all your numbers will be incorrect. So in Appendix A, we're looking at converting the subtest raw score to percentiles and standard scores. So you're going to go to the right age, so this is where Avery fits. We are looking at grasping and visual motor subtests, and so we're going to find her raw scores in this column, and then we'll come over to see her standard score and then her percentile rank. So for grasping, her raw score was 46, so it's right here. So we're going to go, she's got a standard score of 10 and a percentile rank of 50. So now on this form, I'm going to just write those in. So 50th percentile and a standard score of 10. Okay, so I have, here's percentile, so I wrote it in. And then for standard scores, I'm going to write it here. If I knew, for example, that the PT had done the gross motor subtests, and we would have standard scores here, then I would fill in my standard scores here, and I'd be able to get a total motor quotient. That's only if you have all of the standard scores for each subtest. So I'm just in the habit of writing it there. But if I'm just looking at fine motor quotient, I really just need to write it here. So that's the standard score. Now I'm going to do the same thing for visual motor integration. So here's the same table. I'm going to the visual motor column. I'm going to go down and find 122. It's right here. So she's got standard score of 10 and her percentile rank is 50. So I've written those in again. Now, as you can guess, with a percentile rank of 50, Avery is going to come just solidly average. She doesn't have any developmental delay identified in any area at this time. So this is what it looks like with a non-delayed child, which is why I was able to basically use all the standardized instructions. We didn't have to take a lot of breaks. I can tell you with, in my practice, kids who are getting referred to me for assessment is because they have some sort of challenge or delay, and that typically influences assessment process. So I don't know if I've ever actually given the Peabody in a 100% standardized way to an actual client referred to me for testing. So it's just really important to remember, and this is kind of a side note, but when you are modifying any part of your assessment, whether it's giving breaks, changing the standard position that they want you to have, changing the instructions, any of those things, you need to document that in your report so that you can show what their score was, but also all the levels of support that they needed and modification that they needed in order to even gain that score. And that's also where, when you start looking at the evaluation complexity levels, that third category of clinical reasoning, when it talks about modifying your procedures and assessment tools, that's what it's talking about, is were you able to give a standardized assessment straight away, or did you need to kind of change things up a little bit? So that's something just to keep in mind. You should document all of those modifications. For the Peabody, the back page of this form you can use to get observation data, write down any of those notes. So typically on here I would have written she's left-handed. Yeah, she didn't have very many things to modify, but just something to keep in mind. Okay, back to the test. So when I'm looking here, I now need to, I have my percentiles, I have my standard scores. I now need to find this fine motor quotient and then the percentile for that. So what I do is I add these two standard scores, and you'll see here it says sum of standard scores. So I just add those together, which is 20. And then I'm going to a different table in the blue book to find what that 20 means. So what is that fine motor quotient? So I'm going to Appendix B. Appendix B is converting the sums of standard scores to percentiles and quotients. So that's what I'm looking for. And so this table is set up like this. So each page has, this is for total motor quotient, right? So that would be if you did all 5 subtests. Gross motor quotient, so PTs are typically going to be looking at this where they have their 3 subtests. And then fine motor, this is where we're going to look. So we're going to look for that 20. We're going to look for the sum of the quotient scores. So we're going to look for that in the column. Okay, so here it is. Here's fine motor. I'm looking at 20. Okay, then I can see that means my fine motor quotient is 100. And if I follow it over here, my percentile rank is 50. Okay, so I'm going to write that in here. So my quotient and then my percentile. So down here, this is just a way to visually graph. Sometimes this is helpful for parents to see. So we're going to graph these same scores on here. And anything in the white is considered average. This would be above average, and then this would be below average. So I'm going to just put Avery's on here really quick. Hers are pretty easy because she's right in that average range. So you can see there. So, and that's what I do for parents, is just kind of write that on there. So in this subtest, or this test, they don't give you a space to write out what this means, what's that descriptive category, but they do have it in the book. Kind of that interpretive information is in table 4.2 on page 31. So here, when you're writing up your report and you want to look at interpretation, you can look here. So for standard scores, anything from 8 to 12 is considered average. Okay, and then if you want to look at kind of that bell-shaped distribution, the percentages are over here. But then when you start looking, I'm going to focus on below average. So 6 to 7, a standard score would be that below average range. A standard score between 4 and 5 would be 4. And then the standard score of between 1 and 3 is going to be very poor. And if you look out here, that's where we're getting greater than 2 standard deviations away from the norm. Okay, so these kiddos down here are way on the fringe, performing very, very much below where their same age peers are. So remember, this is always comparing to their same age peers. And if they are greater than 2 standard deviations away from the norm, they are needing some pretty significant support. So for sure, kids that are scoring standard scores between 1 and 3, we would be looking at picking up on our caseload. Some of this other, like in the poor area, they're still 2 standard deviations away from the norm, so they're still out there. It's going to depend on your site and what kind of criteria your site or management has put in place in order to determine caseloads and qualifications and things like that. Oh, I forgot about age equivalency. So we do have this column here on our summary form where we can find an age equivalence for each of our subtests. That's in Appendix C in the blue book again. So when you're scoring, you really need this book. Okay, so the way these tables are working is they're set up by subtests, and you're using your raw score and converting that to an age equivalency. So again, we're going to be looking in grasping and visual motor. Now, if you remember, Avery's grasping raw score was 46, so I'm going to be looking for 46 in that column. Okay, so if you can see, grasping 46, so her age equivalency in months is 40, and she is chronologically 40 months, and so that makes a lot of sense, especially because we saw that she's scoring at an average level. So we would expect that her age equivalency in that subtest is close to her chronological age. And we're going to look at visual motor integration. Her raw score was 122, which puts her age equivalency at 41 months. So here is where she's at. Her score was 122, so it puts her at 41. Still very close to her chronological age, and so we shouldn't have any surprises like that. That's one thing, you know, when you're going through and scoring these, it's always a good idea to double or triple check your numbers in the appendix. But you also want, as you're kind of putting together this profile, is like, does this make sense? So one thing that can happen is you could score really high in one subtest and really low in another subtest. This part could come out to still looking kind of average because you're adding together the 2 different subtests, right? So think here for a second, if say grasping my subscore, my standard score had been 5, and in my visual motor, maybe her visual motor integration skills, maybe that standard score was a 15. So she scored really low in one, really high in another. We would still get this fine motor quotient of 100, saying that she's at average. But 5 is in the poor range from interpretation for grasping. Not that we would necessarily pick up a child for one subtest, but certainly a child who's scoring with a standard score of 5, for example, in grasping, we would minimum want to give parents some strategies or games that they could play at home to kind of try to work on that if we're not picking them up. So just something to think about is, does the profile make sense? Do the numbers make sense? If you get a spike somewhere that really isn't fitting with what you clinically reasoned or thought was going to be the case, you need to go back and check your numbers. Make sure that you added correctly for raw score, kind of all those things. Or if just in general someone scored really low but you think they did pretty good in the assessment, or they scored really high and you think they did really poor on the assessment, you need to go back and kind of just check your numbers, or maybe have a team member just review for you, like, where did I make a mistake because this isn't making sense to me. Okay, so any questions about this, please make sure you email me or comment in the video comments on YouTube. And but this is just a general introduction to the Peabody administration and scoring, a little bit about interpretation on just standard administration. Again, keep in mind this could look different. Your scores might be trickier, interpretation might be trickier when you're working with a child with a disability. Also, typically, you're not just doing one assessment. So if you have a child that you're getting referred for, you will be doing potentially multiple assessments or adding play observations, ADL, parent checklists into that to make a whole profile and a summary of skills. So this, again, just an intro, straightforward. When you actually start practicing and getting out there, things can get a little more hairy. Okay, have a great day.